All right, so our goal today is to solve the problem that we had in our last demo where we put a subsurface division modifier. Is that subdivision? It's subdivision surface. I always do that, subsurface division. Subdivision surface modifier on our tower, and we have a major problem of the fact that there is a skin, basically. It put a mesh over the hole that we drilled with a boolean for the door. So let me turn off the door frame really quickly here so we can just kind of take a look at this appropriately. And you will see that really what's happening is it's just stretching this over the hole. And the reason for this, because you might go, why is it doing that? The reason for this is because we have these vertices here that were created by the boolean that actually don't have an edge going to them. Or let me put it in like slightly different manner. The reason why it's happening, excuse me, is because we've wrecked what we call our quads. When you are building an object in Blender, Blender seems to like quads as a default. And what that means is every vertice or every face has 4 points in a corner, okay? And each one of those points is connected to each other by an edge. In this case down here, we have this vertice, or not vertice, but this face here, this shape here, has a whole bunch of points that were created by a boolean, but Blender didn't draw edges from these points to one of the points down here, one of the points up there, or anything like that. And it does that regularly when you do booleans. This will become a major problem. So if you did a boolean to create windows or doors, you will likely, not likely, you will, almost for sure, have to do what I'm about to show you. And it's a little frustrating, but hey, it is what it is. It's not hard. It's more tedious. And the first indicator of a problem with that is if you were to do a loop cut and you see that this loop cut does not go all the way across, okay, that is my indicator that these two faces have an issue that I have to worry about. And that issue is not present in any of the other faces. So I know that there's something wrong with this. And if I go down here and I investigate, sure enough, I've got vertices. So how do we solve this? That's the problem. Well, really what we need to do is we need to extrude vertices up to the top. Now, some people might try and create a loop cut or something and bring vertices over so that you have like triangles here. And I'm going to show you a little bit later on in the demo what that would do to your surface of your object. It's not good, okay? It's not good at all. So what it does is it kind of folds the skin of the face in a weird way that doesn't work very well. But we'll go from there. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to delete the edge that's between these two faces. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I'm going to empty these two faces, but I'm also going to extrude up a little bit more. However, before I do that, upon a little bit of closer inspection, you can see I've got two vertices very close to each other because when I lined up my door, I didn't line it up perfectly to the center of the edge for the tower. So I'm going to merge these together. So click, click, Alt-M, whoops, I hit Windows-M, Alt-M, which merges at last. And it's going to bring that point over. And you can already see that some of the skinning of the face actually changed. And now we're about ready to go. Now you can just right-click on the face, hit X, and delete only the face for these two. But the truth of the matter is that we're going to have to delete this edge anyway, because it's just going to be easier for us if we do. So I'm just going to take the edge selection tool, click on that edge, make sure it goes all the way to the top. Yep, X, delete only edges and faces. The reason why I say only edges and faces is because we do not want to delete the vertices that are at the ends of the line. We only want to delete the line itself, okay? So only the edge itself. So now I'm going to do a loop cut here, okay, just at the corners here and just above. So if I hit Control R, well, I got to back up because it's going to do it right in the middle. Control R, there's my loop cut. I'm going to bring one down there. Control R, left click, and bring it down to about here. Now the reason why I've done two, you will see in a second. And we're going to then take these and extrude up. Now again, some people might say, well, why don't you just draw the points, draw lines to the point over here and create a series of triangles? Once we do this at the end of the demo, I'll show you what happens when you do that, and you'll probably agree it's not so pretty, okay? So all I'm going to do here is just take, go back to vertices select mode. I'm going to take all of these like this, okay? So we've got all those vertices selected. I'm going to hit extrude. I'm going to go 3, hit the extrude key, E, left click so that they're right in place. And I'm going to bring them up so they're roughly in line with this loop cut. Then I'm going to take the outer two, bring them up so that they're basically level. Then the next set, bring them up so they're basically level. And they don't have to be perfect, okay? And then the next set, and bring them up so that they're level. Now some people might say, okay, why are you extruding from the door up? Why didn't you extrude from one of these points over? And that's a very good question. So let me show you why I didn't. If I go to the top view, let's go to wireframe, and I hit extrude, left click. Now as soon as I grab that and move it, you'll notice that the point is moving in, globally at least, in the y-axis. But that's not taking into account the curve that I have naturally for the tower. If this was just a cube shape, it wouldn't matter which direction I went. But if I want to preserve that curve, which I do because I don't want the tower to be flat over the door, that wouldn't make sense. If I want to preserve that curve, the door already has that curve inherent in it. So I might as well use, what's already there, which is the front of the door anyway. And then that way it keeps that curve, and you can see it. It's going to keep the curve, and it will make it nice and smooth. And then with the surface division modifier on there, everything will work out quite fine. So now I have to connect these from here over to here. So I'm just going to right click, right click, right click. Make sure I get to the right vertice there instead of, because you can easily accidentally click on this one, and then you're going to create a really awful shape. That's going to go right through the wall. So I've got all 4 of those connected. I hit F, and it's going to fill that quad back in. That face is now complete. And now I can go here. Now I've got a problem. I don't really have anything that I could do, and I want to stay with quads, so I don't want to make a triangle to this point. So what I really need, A to deselect, Control R for another loop cut, left click, and I'm going to set it right there like that. And now I can right click on that one, right click on that one, that one, that one, and hit F. And now you can see how I'm starting to build the faces back in. And you can see as soon as I deleted the faces that were up here that go all the way to the top, the front half of the door now looks right. The inner is not right, but the front half looks right. Fill that. So now I can just take these, just like this, and I can adjust them a little bit so they're a little bit straighter. It's not a big deal if they're not perfect, okay? And I'm going to hit the E key to extrude again and lift those all the way up here. But now we're going to have some major issues. The first major issue we're going to have is, again, I've got no points to fill in over here, and I don't want to do triangles because triangles are going to make this really rough. So the first thing I'll do, just because, is I'm going to fill this in here, F, fill that in there, F. The other thing that I do not want is I don't want creases here because that's going to cause more troubles. So I'm just going to select those really quickly, start out away from the center, Shift E, go back towards the middle, then make sure that's -1 for, totally. And I could have done them all at once. I probably should have, but that's okay. Didn't do the same thing up here. Okay, -1. So now what we need to do is we need to contrive a way of getting my loop cuts, or doing loop cuts here so that we have what we need on the other side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to hit Control R, and notice it will only do loop cuts on this section of that face. It won't go down the inside. And the reason for that is because I've got all those vertices down on the inside of the door that are hanging out that are giving me problems. But you know what? I'm going to leave that be for right now, because as you're going to see in a second, I'm not going to need to do that too much. So I'm going to right-click before I do that, and I'm just going to leave that be for now. We'll deal with that in a second. So I've got it almost solved on the outside, and it looks pretty good, but we don't have the bottom solved, okay? And that's really important. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a series of loop cuts that match these vertices right here. I also have 2 vertices here, so I'm going to Alt-M, merge them at last, okay? Yes, that is going to cause a little bit of a problem with my door frame that I built in the previous demo. I'll just have to adjust it. That won't take me long at all. So now I'm going to back up here a little bit and do a series of loop cuts, just like, in fact, I can even go 7, and then I'm going to flip it around using the numpad until I've got myself directly on the bottom like this. Go into wireframe mode, okay? And then I'm going to hit Control R, and I'm going to get a loop cut here like this, and I'm just going to line it right up with where the door frame is. Double check it. Oh, see, I did it wrong. Okay, so we'll just do it here then. Loop cut. Actually, I'm going to right-click, get a little bit of a slant here, and I can line it up this way. It doesn't matter if it's exactly perfect. So that looks good right there. Control R. That one looks pretty good there. And, oh, that did an interesting thing. Oh, well, it's going to do that. It's going to do it. So there we go. And so now I have a series of points by which I can, again, do the exact same thing. I always like to be at angles, make sure that I am filling the right things, not filling to one of the points that are back here by accident. That's really important. And last, and you know what? You can actually do multiples if the edges are already there. You can fill in multiples at a time. I like to not do that because it keeps me from making mistakes. Do the same thing on the other side. You get it. I'm not going to do that side just because I want to get moving here on time. So now we're going to go back over on the inside, and we have exactly the same problem, and the solution is identical. So I'm going to take the edge here, X, delete only edges and faces. That's really important because it keeps my vertices. So then I'm going to select all of these. Just make sure, again, that you're getting the right vertices, that you're not accidentally selecting one of the inner ones. Then I'm going to hit the 3 key on the numpad, which spins me around. Z key gets me the wireframe. E key extrudes, left click, bring it up to here. Now we don't have a loop cut on the inside yet, but this will help us align it anyway. Looks like I've got an interesting problem here. Oh, because I didn't, oh, okay. So one of the things that I didn't do is I didn't merge these 2 things together first. Alt-M at last. That was a big mistake. I'm glad I caught that quickly. Okay. 3 key on the numpad, E to extrude, left click, and then bring them up. And then I can essentially just set them up in the exact same place. So then I'll just go here to make sure I'm clicking on the correct ones. 3 key on the numpad again, bring those up horizontally, just to make as much of a horizontal line as possible so that the loop cut will match up easily, and that we're just keeping quads as easy as possible. And then you can see it's got the curve that's identical to the outside pieces, so it's going to work really well. Shift E to get rid of my edge crease now, mine as well. And then I can even, before I do my loop cuts, I might as well just E to extrude, left click, and using the Z-axis, grab those and bring them up here. In fact, 3, Z, And now I can bring these up to match the other ones. So now we're getting really darn close to having this solved. In fact, if you look, notice the door now no longer has a weird mesh over it. So I've already kind of sort of solved the problem, okay? But we do have a couple other things that we need to deal with. So the first of them is I need to do a couple loop cuts here. So deselect, Control R, bring that up to about where that needs to be. And again, I can hit the 3 key and Z and just kind of adjust it if I want it to be perfect, which is, you know, it's good to be precise now. Being more precise now will keep you from having mistakes later on that are going to cost you. You know, time, effort, frustration, all of the above. So Control R, whoops, that was Control A, I think, or I don't know what I did. Control R, bring that down here, 3 key, Z, make sure that one's even with that one, and one more, Control R, bring that down, 3 key, whoops, stink. There we go. I hit the A key instead of the Z key, and I deselected what I had. So there we go. So now they're all lined up. So now it's actually pretty easy to do exactly the same thing that I was doing before, where I'm just going to start filling with the Shift key, right-click and Shift. Just start filling in all the vertices that you need. Now, there's one big problem with this, and there's a reason why I haven't just said, okay, do the same thing. And that is because the inside of this is actually a little different. So if I go here and just fill these, one of the things that I noticed when I was doing this is if you look really carefully, you can see I actually have a step here. See that? Okay? Can't see it this way because the wall's in the way, but if I look really carefully from this angle, you can see that I have a step right there. Okay, so when I did the Boolean, the door was just slightly above. So there's a couple different ways that I could solve that. First, I'm going to merge these two together at last. Okay, so now that's there. You could do a series of loop cuts down along the vertical to kind of make that happen. What I think I'm going to do is just do a series vertical of loop cuts across here and then just merge the points. So just watch. So Control R, there we go, bring that over, Control R, bring that one over, Control R, bring that one over there. And it did a double one, again, that's interesting. Okay, so now what I can do is I can kind of bring this over a little bit and back a little bit to match that one up. And then I can just click, Alt-M at last, click, Alt-M at last. So we're just merging these points to one so that the floor, that's such a pain to do it this way, so that the floor actually doesn't have a little step anymore, and it will also simplify our fix because we won't need another loop cut here at the bottom. So now all I've got to do is this one, to this one, to that one, to that one, fill, and fill. So now the door is looking pretty good. Now the problem is we lost an edge crease here because of my merging. That does happen. So I would just take these two and those two, get my edge crease back, and now my door is starting to look pretty darn good. I haven't done the loop cuts here, but you know how to do that. And you can see that I've now solved the problem. So now, one last problem. What do we do up here? Well, it's actually pretty simple. You just need to do loop cuts. So we're just going to do a series of loop cuts that are going to allow us to fill these in. So Control R, going to go like this, bring that over, Control R, bring that one over, Control R, bring that one over. And now what I can do is just make sure I actually selected the right ones. And you can see now how I've re-added the mesh. One of the comments in my earlier class was, Mr. Weisbrot, this is so tedious. Yes, it is. But trust me, spend the time now on something like this, or pay for it later when you, A, can't use a door, or when you can't do the texturing correctly because your UV maps aren't working right, that sort of thing. It's well worth it to spend the time on something like this, which is a little tedious. I will admit, it's tedious. But spend the time now, and you will be much happier later on. You won't even know the problems that you are going to avoid if you do this sort of stuff right off the bat, because you won't have them. Okay, so I won't fill in that bottom, but you get the idea. Now, let's just take a look at what happens really quickly as a negative. If instead of taking these points and making quads out of them, I just bring them over to this point. So I'm just going to take those. Actually, let me save this really quickly. Okay, there we go. Now, Alt-M at last. Take this one. Alt-M at last. See, this is, whoops, wrong one. This one to that one. Alt-M at last. This is the tempting thing to do. This is what everybody always wants to do, I think, is just make a point. I did it again. Is make a point, and then you bring everything over. Actually, I don't want to do that. There, at last, and then this one to this one. You know, this is what people want to do. And if you take a look at it, let's get out of edit mode. You see that weird kind of creasing shape you've got right there? Okay, and now this shape here, you can see a little weird shadow there. Okay, now this is kind of a little strange here. We might have to work on some of the edges here. But this crease here, that shouldn't be there. And that crease right there is there because we're taking these quads and we're changing them into tris in just one area of the model. If you're going to work in tris, you need to work in tris for the whole thing if you can. Now, sometimes, I'll be honest, when you're building a model, you have to convert to tris in certain areas and just do a triangle. And hopefully it doesn't create a crease like that. But sometimes you can get away with it. It's not going to work in a nice, simple, smooth object like this. You're going to see the tris. So we've got some issues here that we could easily take care of. You know, so undo all these. Okay, and we can take care of them by grabbing this, going all the way up here, and just pulling it out a little bit, ever so slightly. And then tab out and see how that is. Oh, see, I just made it worse. So, but you can play with that sort of thing if you do have any ripples in your texture because you've got more vertices. That can happen. But more importantly, look, we've got a door, you know, and the door goes all the way through and it looks good. And once I fill that section, it'll be perfect. And that's what I needed it to be, as opposed to having a mesh put over it. I've got my modifier on there. Everything's working as it should. Little ripples like this, honestly, if you do the texture right, they might not even show up anyway. You know what I mean? Because I'm going to make this like cinder block textured, so it might not even show up. Might be completely, you know, invisible once you put the texture, the normals mapping on there. Does this make sense, though, how you'd go about and do this? Okay, so quick review. You're deleting edges or deleting faces. You have to use loop cuts and slides to add points that you can draw to. And then you use what you've got. So I used the door and I extruded upwards. That way I had the curvature that I wanted to, or at least it was easier to do the curvature that I wanted to. And I was able to kind of keep everything the same. The really important thing is that you keep quads if you can. So if your model is made out of faces that are built from 4 vertices each, 4 sides, okay? They don't have to be 4 equal sides. They don't even have to be close to a rectangle, but it needs 4 sides. If you've got that, you want to keep that if you can, or else you're going to get some weird shapes and creases and happening, things that'll happen when you see your object in Unity. Does this make sense? Okay.